Well, hey, welcome, man. Let me start off by saying thank you for being a part of this conversation today. Whether you are with a group right now, maybe a part of your house church, maybe you're just by yourself wanting to dive a little bit deeper into our conversation in the book of 1 Peter, man, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad we get to be a part of this conversation together. So just a quick recap. We've been talking about this idea of being scattered, right? And what it looks like to live a sent life as opposed to a scattered life. How do we find, or how do we place purpose and intentionality in the chaos and the uncertainty of life? And so we've been talking through a lot of big ideas, right? Hope, that there is a living hope in Jesus, that we have a call to holiness, to be set apart, to not only be different, but to make a difference. And so as we wrap up the letter of 1 Peter today, we're gonna be looking at 1 Peter chapter 5. Peter's going to wrap up this conversation with the idea of humility. And so remember, he's writing to people maybe who are experiencing life a little bit differently than you and I, but certainly who are experiencing the same feelings of being disjointed, of being scattered, of feeling like you're running all over the place with no clear clue of what's going to come next. And so as he writes to us in this sense, he brings us to this idea of humility. And now, humility is a really interesting topic for me because I think it's one of those things that we probably would all define a different way. I mean, think about, how would you define humility? What would that look like? What would that sound like to you? Can you put it into words? I ran across this quote that I think is really powerful, but this pastor said that humility is not about passively receiving, rather it is about powerfully enduring. That humility gives us the power to endure difficult situations and circumstances. And that's exactly what Peter brings us to in this letter. 1 Peter chapter 5, I'm gonna read through some of these verses. Here's what it says. So I exhort the elders among you. And when Peter talks about elders there, he's not just talking about like old people, right? He's talking about leaders in the church. He says, so I exhort the elders, I encourage the leaders among you as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that's going to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples of the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, he's talking about Jesus there, and when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Likewise, so now Peter kind of shifts gears a little bit. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you. And so now look, it doesn't matter if you're old, young, leader, follower, it doesn't matter. Clothe yourself, all of you, with humility towards one another. For, and this is a quote from Proverbs chapter 3, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And so here's what Peter is saying in all of these verses, that regardless of our situation, circumstance, regardless of who we are or what we're experiencing, what we're walking through in life, he says in order to lead well, in order to learn well, in order to live well, we must do so from a place of humility. Right? He talks about the leaders in the church leading not from pride, but with humility. He talks about those who are younger, is what he says, the people who are learning, the people who are following, to do so with humility, right? Because we understand that pride and arrogance will keep us from a place of really even acknowledging that we need to learn or that we need to grow, right? We need humility just to acknowledge, hey, I don't know everything. And he says, men, in order to live well, because God opposes the proud. And so our pride keeps us in opposition to God, but God gives grace to the humble, undeserved, unmerited favor. That's what grace means. And so whether we're leading, whether we're learning, and oftentimes, man, we're doing that consecutively, but whether we're in a place of leadership, whether we're learning in life, or really in all aspects of life, Peter says, hey, look, humility is how we endure the difficulties we find ourselves in. And so you can think about, the different places that you've seen humility exercise, right? Like, I mean, have you ever had a boss that did so that led you pridefully or arrogantly? It's hard to follow that kind of boss, right? You don't want to follow that. You don't want to be in that environment. No. But you love to follow a leader that trusts, that inspires, that does so with a humble heart, right? You like to be around people. You like to learn and grow from people that aren't prideful and arrogant. Nobody likes to be around a know-it-all. No, we like to grow and learn together, right? So to lead, to learn, to live well, man, we must do so from a place of humility. But the difficulty is that humility causes us to acknowledge some of our struggles. The next couple of verses there, verses 6 through 11, Peter's going to talk about our limits and our struggles, right? And we have to come to a place in humility, and this is what it allows for us to acknowledge that, hey, we are limited, that we have limitations, and that we have struggles, right? That we don't know it all, that we are imperfect, we miss the mark sometimes, that we don't know the future. We don't know what tomorrow's going to hold. We don't know what we're going to struggle with tomorrow. We don't know what the news is going to hold, but here's what makes that okay. Here's what Peter says, like it's okay to be able to acknowledge that we have limits and we have struggles. Why? Because there's a good God who loves us. And that God, who is all-knowing and all-powerful, who holds all authority, sees you in your limitations and struggles, and he loves you and he cares for you. Verse 6 says, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand, under the powerful hand, under the awesome hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him. He carries the weight of our anxieties. Why? Because he cares for you. You see, so we can acknowledge our limits, we can acknowledge our struggles, and listen to me, it's great to be able to acknowledge those and admit those with wise counsel around us, right? With people that care about us, with people that love us, because in that, man, we can see the goodness of God and that he cares for us. That he doesn't just abandon us in our struggles. No, he takes our anxieties from us. That's one of the reasons I love what we do at Venture House Church, right? Because it puts us in a place of being able, in a humble heart, to admit and acknowledge our struggles and find people around us that love us and care for us and can point us to a good God. Verse 8 says, be sober-minded, be watchful, pay attention, think about, because your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. This is why it's important to acknowledge our struggles, because the enemy attacks us in our struggles. Verse 9, resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by the brotherhood throughout the world. And after you've suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. Here's what Peter's saying, that if we're going to resist the enemy and we're going to acknowledge our struggles and find healing from our struggles, it's going to take a firm faith, and that firm faith is rooted and founded in a future faith. That there is a day coming when Jesus will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. And that is what we look forward to together. And so, look, man, I'm thankful that we get to be a part of this conversation. I hope that these words, man, I hope they bring you peace in the midst of your struggles, in the midst of maybe your chaos and uncertainty. And I hope this season isn't just about being scattered for you, but my hope and my prayer through 1 Peter is that you find a sense of purpose and intentionality in this season, to be more sent than scattered. Hey, look, I love you, and I'm glad that you're here. We'll see you Sunday.